My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. You know who I am, Rick Clemons. I'm the host. I'm the guy who created all this craziness, but I'm also the guy that hosts our once a month chats. And I want you to sign up for those. Go to gaymenschat.com. And also, don't forget to come join our community. We're posting stuff. I'd like to see some more guys in our community where we can have these conversations continue. But speaking of continuing conversations, today's guest is somebody who came into my world through that doorway, coming to the men's chats on the monthly basis. We got to know each other, and then he got mad at me because I came to New York City and didn't get to see him. So I'm surprised he's even showing up here today to talk to me. But he's become what I would consider a friend, somebody that I've really started admiring for who he is, how he shows up in the world. And he's an interior designer. He's a guy who really wants to have impact. He kind of runs by the motto, let's change overwhelmed into overjoy. And that happens in his designs. It happens in his life. And I thought, you know what? It's time for me to bring my buddy, John Patrick, onto the podcast. JP is what we call him. And we're going to have, I don't know, JP, where are we going? We're just going to have a conversation, right? We're just going to see where
Absolutely.
we go today.
But I'm not mad at you because you didn't come to New York and tell me and blah, blah, blah. That's,
it happens.
If that's your version of the story, that's okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not upset.
No. And then I promise you, the next time we are there, I want to come spend some time with you. I actually thought we were going to get out to Brooklyn, and we didn't get to Brooklyn. And I know y'all that live there, it's like, it's no big deal. But so let's talk about let's talk about the differences between the two of us, which there's many, but there's also a lot of commonality. So I didn't come out till late in life. You came out much earlier in life, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I always knew that there was something different about me.
Right.
Even as a child, playing, I always found that I was attracted to men or, my boys, what or have you. I guess maybe I was a senior in high school, after having several hetero dating disasters, that I just decided I was going to come out to myself and finally, admit it, and that's, it wasn't like I just woke up one day and said, okay, I'm gay now. It was definitely there was a little bit of a journey.
Yep. But I love that hetero dating disasters. I think that's probably the nicest way to put it for most of us as gay men. It's I tried, and it was all a disastrous experiment, to be honest.
Yeah, and it wasn't like I didn't have wonderful, girlfriends.
Right.
The last one that I had, actually, she's never come to any of our high school reunions, and I was just really wanting to talk to her. But she's a doctor now. Good for her.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah. We went to Catholic school,
Okay, well, that could be, that could be a whole episode of itself.
Exactly. Catholic school survivors. Exactly.
Right. Exactly. So then there's also probably this assumption he's an interior designer guy. Well, of course he's gay. Let's just go there, right? And this is one of the things that bugs me is when people start to say things like that, oh, well, of course he's a dancer. He's got to be gay. Or, oh, he's an interior designer. Okay, fine. There is some truth to some of these pieces, but what if you just enjoy those things and that's just who you happen to be as a man? I find that always an interesting thing, that these assumptions that get made about gay and things people enjoy doing or what they end up doing in the career. How has that been for you navigating that part of life?
Well, my career progression, I guess I've always had what we would consider, the bunny ears, the gay jobs. Right. I was a busboy in a busy restaurant, then I was a waiter, then I worked in the service industry with the airline industry, and then I was in fashion, and then I was actually worked in the gay nonprofits in New York City. for a while. And then, I should say this is my third act now. At almost 40, I started my interior design company. But my experience, in the 80s when I started working, I turned 18 in 83. I definitely feel, or I didn't feel like I was needed to be like closeted so much. I mean, I think it was, but you know what? There were some very pretty straight boys that worked in retail when I was in retail, and they were the exception. But I've always worked in industries that were predominantly dominated by women. So I guess I never looked at the stereotypical aspect in my work life, but I started going out to the gay bars, and pre apps, pre internet even. I would go out practically. I think at the beginning I was going out like 7 nights a week, and I felt the need to be more closeted in that aspect of not telling my parents where I was going, or not telling my straight friends where I was going. So I had more of a conversation around that. And my best friend at the time was a heterosexual woman, and she was my fag hag, and we went everywhere, But in terms of now in my life, and there are straight men who are interior designers. I'm sure that they're more the exception than the rule. But I see straight men knitting on the train or crocheting. I mean, that's something that we typically associated, with women. Needlepoint, any of those kinds of, handicrafts. I even know some straight fashion designers. So, I love how just culturally, these are the careers that, hairdressing and fashion design, and, even I have a brother-in-law who's amazing chef, and he was in that world for 30 years, and is a painter, and, is not your stereotypical, butch hetero type.
Right.
So I mean, I didn't get any flack from my family on that end, like from career choices. It was, definitely other things that I felt I needed to, didn't want to say, oh, I'm going to this gay bar tonight.
Right.
I think I was 20 or 21 when I finally did come out to my mother.
But this was some crucial times to be coming out. Let's be honest.
Yeah, I mean, so I graduated from high school in the early 80s, and the year that I came out was the year that AIDS got a name.
Yep.
And there was this diet product called AIDS. It was spelled AIDS, and it was marketed to women. It was a chocolate that you ate, and it was an appetite suppressant. And I don't remember what they changed the name to, but they changed our whole marketing concept because of acquired immune deficiency syndrome being called AIDS. And it was a very scary time. I mean, it wasn't until more 85, 86, when I was in my early 20s, 19, 20, 21, and I had met friends. And you would see men at the bars wearing makeup to cover up the lesions on their face, or people who were not notorious, who were not so thin before, were rather thin. The gay bar where I lived at the time in Connecticut was really, I mean, I'm still friendly with a lot of those people. It was like a community. We had a softball team, and on Sunday afternoon, the bar owner would have a free cookout. So we would go to this beach, this gay part of this beach in Westport, Connecticut, and it was called Sherwood Island. And then the boys and we used to call them dykes then, but we can't call them. That's not nice anymore.
Right.
The lesbians, the lesbitarians. They all played softball, and there were some straight people actually on our softball team. And then we would go to the bar. It would open early, it would open at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, and there'd be this big cookout in the patio. And then I was one of the drag stars du jour, and I started doing drag in 1984, 1985. And Sunday night was the night for the big show, so everybody would be drunk and full of food. And 8 o'clock was the show, and but it was funny because during the beginning, there was still a strong number of people who came out, and then toward the later 80s, 87, 88, 89, it kind of dipped. And then once we got, I think AZT was the first breakthrough medication. People started to come back out again. And then I had a very close friend who was also an entertainer. He was my first friend. He died on his 30th birthday in 1988. And he had been diagnosed the year before. He literally lasted a year almost to the day. And that kind of hit me. It's funny, because he's been gone now. So he's been gone 40 years. And he's still someone whose influence I feel still at this time in my life, at age 60. And, then the whole condom thing, I think that was the condom culture. Safe sex and all of that. And, it was amazing because during the Reagan years, nobody wanted to say AIDS, nobody wanted to say gay. All these things that we're relying on now, AMFAR and all these research foundations that were funded, that are now not being funded by the government. That was when all of that sprung up. I mean, it was a very, very interesting time to be alive, let alone to be gay and be alive. It was in a way, it was very similar to what's happening now. I mean, it was definitely a cultural war.
Yeah. What do you feel like is one of the things, because you lived through it, I lived through it. I wasn't completely out, so let's kind of compare.
Yeah.
Here's the differences. So I graduated in 81. Sounds like you graduated in that same
83.
realm.
83 from high school.
Okay, you don't have to remind me I'm older than you. You don't have.
Oh, I was so subtle. Come on.
You were very subtle about that one. But there was this piece of me that's like, okay, I realize who I am, but I wasn't quite there. However, when the year that you graduated is the year that I did come out to my parents, and then I went back in. But all through that time period, you were living and breathing it in your own way. I was too, but in my world, I was living and breathing it behind the curtains, so to speak.
Sure.
There was some behind the curtains for years too, even though you were out like, okay, here's who I am. But what I found so interesting, go ahead, John. JP.
No, in a at home, it was like, don't ask, don't tell. We didn't talk about it.
Right.
So yes, I was still somewhat closeted at home. My parents were extremely Catholic, so there was I had to keep it cool, Although I lived at home for a while, and I used to get in drag on the second floor bathroom with the door open, and
Okay.
So I mean, I think that was my way of being defiant, because as my 91-year-old mother reminds me, I did not give them much trouble growing up. It wasn't until I was grown up that I gave them trouble.
But it is interesting because your own way of like, I'm living through this, my way of living through was like, I still know this is me, but I'm just going to kind of play the game, so to speak, which I ended up doing till I was 36. But all through that, JP, here's the thing. I was actually observing from afar, so to speak, what it really looked like to be gay. And it helped define who I was as a gay man, even though I was not out. There was those bits and pieces like, okay, well, it's okay. When I did come out the second time, I was very secure in who I was, as far as I know I'm gay. Because I'm like, I know what turns me on. I see what I would like to have, even though there wasn't a lot of representation even then. Yeah. I mean, these were just a few years after Ellen had come out on her show and all this sort of stuff. There was such Yeah, the 90s. Yes, the lovely. Oh, that's a whole nother
The
generation thing we
protease
could go on.
inhibitors, and the we're not using
Right.
condoms anymore, and AIDS is no longer a death sentence, and it, gay is becoming much more mainstream. I mean, when you think about it, like people talk about like RuPaul, like Drag Race. Like RuPaul has been consistently on television since the early 90s with
Yep.
his own show, a guest on a show, something. And, when you think about it, it's like, yeah, I mean, I do remember a time when there was no Drag Race, but the 90s was a very interesting time. We have our perpetual ally, Madonna.
Yep.
And that was one of my first claims to fame was I did impersonated Madonna, toured the country doing a lampoon, so to speak, of
Mm-hmm.
her HBO concert. And it was very interesting because like literally the drugs were not as refined as they are now, where the cocktails only have like one ingredient or whatever. But even still, now the stigma around being HIV positive is much. I would say it's so few and far between in the gay community as opposed
Yep.
to how it was before. Because I can remember. I mean, I remember, working in this nightclub in the '90s, and you know, if it was tacky, but people would go around like, "Oh, so no, did you know that he's HIV positive? Did you know? Did you know?" And when you're young, you don't necessarily think about things like, well, that speaks more of my character than theirs. Than if I'm going around talking about them. But
Yep.
now I have now whenever someone says to me, oh, I'm going on a date or I'm hooking up or whatever, I do ask, and if they say they are, we act accordingly, and if they don't tell me, we act accordingly, and if they say they're not, we still act like they are, Um,
Right.
but yeah, just like my head, like it's all these thoughts coming into my head just about the difference between where we are now and where we were then, and the
What are some of
journey
the things
there.
that what are some of the things that you feel like at this stage of your life
Mm.
that who you are now and what you are, like if you could step back in, I know there's hundreds of things, JP,
Oh, oh,
but like something that
excuse
really
me.
is like this is what has made me who I am. This is a value that is truly me because I experienced that back then. What would be something you would share with the audience?
Um, Kindness is the bare minimum common denominator.
Hmm.
It doesn't cost anything to be kind. And I think that if everyone, myself included, could operate from that place, um, number one, it would take a lot of stress away because I used to say my favorite game was people watching, also known as judging.
Come on, just
you
call it
know,
what it is. I'm out. Let's go
right?
out people
Exactly,
judging. Let's go have a cocktail and
exactly,
people judge.
exactly.
Right?
Let's go sit let's go sit in Hell's Kitchen um, at Archie McPhee's on the corner of 49th and 8th and watch all the, it's all the hot guys leaving the gym with their spandex and all the fashion victims and all that.
Right.
Yeah, that's definitely judgment, but it's still, though, I think if it's just between two people who are sitting there and going, oh, look at her, look at that. I think it's much less harmful than I have seen people get up and go, oh my God, you're so ugly. Why'd you leave the house? I actually witnessed that on the subway over the weekend. I couldn't believe I was watching it.
I think
Um,
this is an interesting piece, though, because this is
mm,
something that is very prevalent in our community.
hmm
First of all, it's prevalent in the human race, but there's something about
yeah,
this judgment, you know, dishing, let's dump the tea, all that
sure.
stuff on one another. Yet, to your point, kindness is the way forward. And if we were
Yeah, I mean,
kind to each other, what would be different as a society at this point? That's a biggie right there.
well, I think, here is something else that like that in the now versus the then. Um, my favorite quote from The Incredibles is Edna Mode, who is, she's a designer. She's based on Edith Head, the Academy Award-winning costume designer. She says, "Darling, I never focus on the past. It distracts from the now." And I, I think of that quote often because thinking about what the gay community that I experienced growing up early on was like before AIDS, like right at the beginning, it was much more inclusive. Um, and then all of a sudden we got all these, like because people wanted to, people started to work out and eat right and all that. I mean, gay men, I think, always took the extra step to look good. But, you know, there are body types. I mean, it doesn't, if I would have to be a skeleton to have a 34 waist. Um, so I think that one of the other things, to speak back to my younger self or what would be different is I never, like when I look at photos or when I post photos of myself, like from my teens and my 20s and my early 30s, when I had a full head of red hair,
Right.
people are like, "Oh my God, you were so handsome. I mean, you still have those beautiful, intense blue eyes and all that." But I get all these comments, from gay people, straight people, whatever, on whatever social media I posted on. And it's very interesting because when I was that age, I never thought of myself as beautiful or attractive or anything. I compared myself to other people. And, obviously, I think just in human nature, we are our own worst critics.
Right.
But one of my longtime friends, high school friend, recently commented. I posted my picture from the third grade or fourth grade, and my father had just passed away. He died very young, and you could see that there's definitely. I'm smiling, but I have one of those like smile for the camera kind of smiles,
Right.
and so I made some commentary, and very interesting. Just I never thought of myself as cute or whatever. And I think I created my drag character, Candy Monroe, out of that need to feel that I was beautiful. And I'm also a reasonably shy person. I'm definitely content. I enjoy my own company, and if I never had to leave my apartment except to like do the necessary things, um, I probably would be okay with that.
But I think that's a
So I
piece of
have this.
fine. But don't you think, JP, that's a piece of finding, like really finding yourself and embracing who you are is to be
Oh,
content with
sure.
yourself?
Oh, sure. Oh,
I
sure.
think I
But
think so many men in the gay community
but
have
it took
not
me a long
discovered
time to
that.
get there.
Right, but
It
I
took
don't
me
think
a
a lot of guys have figured that out. And so then, and again, this is not passing judgment, guys, if you're one of those. It's not like, oh, Rick and JP think they're so superior. No, because it's taken me a long
not
time
at
to get
all.
to, yeah, it's taken me a long time to get to that space. And not every day is that way. Let's just be honest. I mean, not every day do I feel confident and like I love myself and trust myself. But I can say this, the more I leaned into that hard lean and like just love you for who you are. Doesn't mean I'm not going to say, oh, there isn't room for improvement. But the more I leaned into it, the more content I became. In fact, I was listening to a podcast. I've been traveling the last few days. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I travel, like especially when I'm traveling in a car, driving to get to
Mm-hmm.
airports and stuff, I will listen to podcasts. And I listened to one that Oprah was doing with somebody, and she brought up something that Jane Fonda said. And Jane Fonda recently said, after all this time, instead of pursuing perfection, I've instead accepted being a whole person. And it's so much different than the perfection piece I've always chased. I just now am content with being whole. And as soon as I heard that, I thought, Okay, that's a new
That's
one to think about and
that's
really
very
embrace.
deep. That's very deep, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
because I
yeah,
feel like
or
wholeness to me is I'm accepting of who I am. I'm
mhm,
working towards accepting others as who they are in this
mhm,
craziness currently. That's really hard to get
mhm,
to when I can't
mhm.
really accept that someone else being whole means you get to be a shit to everybody else. But
Well,
there's these
but that
pieces of
right.
stepping into that can help us get into our own quote wholeness. So I know you have some wisdom because I saw you perk up when I said that.
Um, yeah, so I always say, um, I mean, we've had this conversation before. You know, I've like done some like work on myself in terms of like self-reflection and that kind of stuff. And perfection is a very interesting word because in a leadership perspective, like if you're in a leadership position or just whatever, however that resonates, um, perfection is only seek when you're looking for perfection, you're finding the imperfection in other people,
Hmm.
as opposed to if you're striving for excellence, or like you said, like the whole person. Well, if if you see somebody who's faltering, instead of making them wrong, why don't you kind of, is there a way to say, hey, let me help you, or how can I support you? And, are you having a moment? Do you need to talk to someone or whatever? As opposed to well, I'm perfect and, I have a 29-inch waist and a very large, member and all that kind of stuff, and because you don't have it, you're not perfect. I mean, I think we still see a lot of that.
But as we see that, I think there's also an opportunity, especially in our own gay community,
Mm. Mm-hmm.
to go look back inwards. If we see, okay, this, go ask yourself, okay, if I'm trying to see that, like, I'm coaching a lot of guys right now who are, on the dating realm. Well, how do I find that guy? And all this, like, okay, well, my first question is, well, what is it that you desire? Which is an
Mm-hmm.
interesting question versus what do you want? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Or what
Oh,
do you need?
and the answer to all three of those is never the same thing.
No, but it always throws them for a loop, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
then I say, well, what if the perfect, with the ear
Oh
bunny quotes,
yes.
so to speak, what if the perfect isn't actually out there, but what you could enjoy being with is?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's a completely different shift. What as a coach, I'm trying to shift their perspective of, okay, where are we going here, right? And too
Yes.
often in our world as gay men, and again, I'm operating from a quote somewhat older and wiser, so to speak, perspective, as are you. I think if
I
there's
just
one
like
thing
to
I could
say X-nay on the old nay. I just like to say wiser.
wiser, okay, we'll go with wiser.
Or
If I
experience.
more experience, there we go. If I could give anything to anyone who is, you know, still up and coming through their experiences,
Mhm,
it would be to say, take the fucking word perfection, perfect, out of your vocabulary. Just take it away.
mhm,
Just
mhm.
ixnay it. Because if you can go, I would like someone to be like this, but if they're not, whatever. As soon as we diminish the perfection, they have to be this. I got to have these things have to be on the checklist. Yes, it's nice to have like, I would like this, I would like this, I would like this. There's nothing wrong with that. But when we get so caught up in the I need this, suddenly that's all we're going to aspire to, and then
Mhm.
disappointment is right around the corner every time. And I
So,
wish if we could just embrace, like, become content with what gets given to you. If somebody were to point blank ask me, and you've heard me say this in some of the men's calls, if somebody had told me that my husband is the one I would have ended up with, I would have said, I don't think so.
you know
And
something?
he,
all three of my relationships that I did in long-term ones, not one of them was my 100% type.
No.
You know, the first one
And
was
my
physically my
husband's
type.
gorgeous. Hmm.
The second one was emotionally my type, and the most recent, the last one, was a good mix. But yeah, I mean, I think another thing that happens a lot is I don't know if this is unique to gay men, but I definitely find it's true for me lately, is people, I call it time travel. So anybody who's kind of not, someone says to me, "Oh, I want to date." Okay, well, what are you doing? Are you like, did you have some nice photos taken of yourself to put on if you want to do the dating site?
Right.
You know, did you take yourself off of all the hookup sites so that someone doesn't say, "Oh, I saw that queen on Grindr"? You know, she's got a glory hole in her house. Like, I'm saying, like, what you go saying? So, well,
Right.
listen, I paid for one of those sites, one of the, like, I can't remember which one it was, but it was uber. I mean, it was ridiculous. It was after I was in this relationship and it ended, and I was like, yeah, I should be dating. I should be dating. And almost every single guy that I got matched up with was like, oh, I saw him on that hookup site. Oh, I saw him on that hookup site. And if I saw them, they saw me. So I wrote, when they wanted me to renew my membership, right? I was like, this is like 10 years ago. That was like $600. So I wrote to them and I'm like, you're not exposing me to a unique uh, demographic of men that I'm not seeing on every other type of social media that there is available,
Right.
So a very interesting little anecdote. I was taking this, I have I have several coaches that I've worked with over the years, and my Liz, my coach around abundance, the small group leader in that particular coaching module said, write a note to the universe of what it is physically and spiritually that you would like in a partner. So I started, I'd like him to be, 6'2" or taller. I'd like him to have maybe some salt and pepper hair, be close to my age, 5 years older, 5 years younger, hairy body, reasonably good shape. I went down, I made this like 20-point checklist. So about 5 minutes later, we're friends now, but we weren't friends then. My friend Tom comes around the corner and he's every single thing on that list, but he's married to a woman. I forgot to tell the universe that he had to be gay. So I think it's very interesting when someone gets clear about what it is that they want, what they need, what they desire. I think that those things line up a lot more easily, and that person comes around. But the other thing, I think, as we get older, I find this true for myself. I probably am okay with taking risks, but I don't take the same kind of risks that I used to take when I was like in my 20s and my 30s.
I love that. Because here's where I'm going to tie this in. The kind of risk you were willing to take in your 20s and 30s have probably given you the wherewithal and the wisdom to know the solid risks you're willing to take now. Back then, we'd take crazy risks. Well, let's just go do that. Let's go. Because there wasn't as much thought put into it.
Some of the risks. On my 30th birthday, I was single. And this is in the phone sex days. And I met a guy from Boston, and I was living in, I remember, I was either in New York or I was somewhere between New York and Connecticut. And I took a Greyhound bus on my 30th birthday to Boston. And when I got there, it was a good thing he never shared his photos with me or anything, because had he, I never would have made that trip. So, lesson learned from that. I was like, okay, I think I'm done with the instant gratification stuff. Yeah. And, other risks. I around the same time, maybe maybe a little bit older, a couple years older, I took a flight to South Carolina to meet up with someone that I had been matched up with, that I was, we were talking online, and it started out great. And then by the end of the second or the third day, when he started to really reveal himself, who he really was, I was like, wow, he was really on his best freaking behavior until he felt comfortable with me. And now I see who he is. And he didn't understand why I was upset. And I said, well, you're a completely different person than you were before. No, I'm the same. I'm the same. So, I think, and especially, I mean, somebody who's older, who hasn't had, like, we have our fellow men on our call, some of who are older, who have never dated, or, haven't had their first experience yet. I don't know that I'd want to go through that at this age. You know what I mean? I don't know that I would want. I mean, I'm grateful for what I have and who I am and the work I've done on myself. And I'm always willing to speak with anybody who is in a situation, wherever they are in their coming out journey. But man, I'd hate to be in my 50s or my 60s and not have had that unrequited love, or not have had that had those really bad boyfriend situations. I've had a lot of 3 hours, 3 weeks, 3 months type boyfriends over the years. And I think that I'm not going to say it's made me bitter, but it's definitely made me very aware of, like, when people are being authentic, or when I'm being authentic, or, there's nothing, listen, hey, there's nothing wrong with, it's $1 billion industry, the instant hookup social media stuff.
Yep.
I'm not going to plug any of them because they're not giving us any money.
Yeah. So something you just brought up, something you just said, JP, is really kind of important, because yes, I'm grateful for where I am, and I do feel for so many guys that are going through this at that stage of life, late 40s, 50s, 60s. I just interviewed somebody who he came out at when he was 70. But here's where I feel like the wisdom actually serves us, because you wouldn't want to go through that, which means that now how you approach dating and relationships and all of that is through the lens of what you've experienced. Here's where, and you've seen it on the calls when we're in our monthly call with the guys, you can see where that wisdom that we possess can be so beneficial to somebody who's sitting there at 50 going, I just don't get it. Why are guys so non-committal? Why, da, 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 da. We can lend our wisdom in those moments to, this is part of what I'm going to say, you kind of have to go through to get to where you want to be. And of course, that puts panic in a lot of those guys' mind. Like, great. So you're telling me I have to be a teenager for the next 6 years before, well, kind of, but you get to control that too. So I think this is where wisdom, like what we've experienced, gets to be impactful. But yes, girl, I would not want to back up and go, let's go through this.
Rick, could you die?
I would be like,
well,
oh my gosh.
Here's the thing, I just have had a wonderful year with a much younger man. I don't know what we are at this point, but we are what we are. I wouldn't say he's my boyfriend anymore, but whenever I go out, and I still love to go. I can't stay out till 5 a.m. and get up and go to work the next day like I could in my 20s and my 30s. Right. Even in my early 40s. But I go out, and it's like, do I look like I'm the kind of person who has to pay for sex now, or that I'm the kind of person who has to buy drinks for all the young guys? I mean, listen, when I was in my 20s, and an older gentleman, when I was 20, I thought 35 was old. So, it's funny how that scale adjusts as we age, because now I don't think 60 is really that old, or even 70. Yeah. But I do remember thinking, oh, this is being out in bars for young people. Here's this older guy, 35, 45, 55, who's here. And yeah, I had a friend who was a little bit older, and I used to sit with him at the end of the bar, and he would buy the first round of drinks, and sometimes the second.
Mhm.
But I also think that that's part of, I mean, if I go out, I'm not going to buy a drink just for somebody just because they ask me to.
Right.
Um, you know, but I I also feel that I was very appreciative of older people. I mean, my parents are a generation older. Like my mom got married at 21, but she didn't have me till I was 31. And so, or till she was 31. So when I went to kindergarten, all the mothers were in their 20s with
Right.
pigtails and ponchos. And my mother had, a cashmere twin set with pearls and a straight skirt. I mean,
Right.
in the late 60s, early 70s. So, my mother was a woman and all the other mothers were girls, so to
Right.
speak.
Exactly.
So, so and then of course I come from a blended family because my dad died young, my mom remarried, and all my step siblings are older than I am. So, I feel like um, the the experience is what you make of it in
Mhm.
terms of oh, I'm coming out later, I'm coming out earlier, whatever. But I do think that, especially now, I think that the younger generation of gays is extremely judgmental over the older guys. I haven't experienced a lot of, oh my God, not that I'm like a superhero and I want somebody to acknowledge, but I did the March on Washington. I did the gay march. I did the Black Lives Matter. I've done my share. I did Elevate in the 80s when we didn't have any medication. I did, ACT UP. You know, I did all that. I've done a million fundraisers. I've contributed to fundraisers. Um, but there was a time, even in the 90s, living in New York, and New York is all, even just like San Francisco, it's always been a mecca for gay life. And um, I now I'm not so afraid, and in recent years, not so much, but uh, to just have a public display of affection. The kids now, they think nothing of it, walking down the street and kissing and holding and hanging all over each other. And I would have been terrified to do that. Not
Mhm.
because I was afraid to be who I was, but because of all the hatred and all of the, we went through a rough period in the early 90s with all the,
Oh
like the
gosh,
gay
yes.
bashings and all of that. And these kids don't understand what I mean, literally what physically and emotionally a beating that we've taken
Hmm.
just so that it's okay for them to do that.
Yeah.
So not that I'm looking for any acknowledgement on that or whatever, but I do find it very interesting that there's not a lot of connection between the generations, especially now
But
that I'm part of that older generation.
right.
You
And I
know?
wish there was more. I mean, this is one of the things I wish there was more of. I mean, I
Mhm.
would, and I have some people in my world that they appreciate what I bring to them. In fact, it's kind of interesting because of our circle of friends, my husband and I are the oldest ones. Then there's kind of a
Mhm.
group that's in their early 50s. And then
Mhm.
from that group, we got one or two in their 40s and then a couple that are in their 30s. So we kind of span it. We span from 30
Mhm.
on up to the 60s, right? It's
Mhm.
interesting. In fact, I wasn't with my husband this weekend when this conversation took place. I was out of town, but he went out with the guys,
Mhm.
and one of the guys is like, I really don't understand what it is that Rick does. He goes, I guess I can't wrap my head around why Rick would have to help guys come out of the closet. He goes, I don't see what, I came out when I was young and I just don't understand why these guys would need this help. And I think that's a
Oh my
perfect
goodness.
example of a younger generation not understanding what are the traumas that happen when you've been raised to be this and your religion or whatever your societal way of being in the world says this is who you're supposed to be and this is how you're supposed to show up and there is no other alternative. That's kind of the message that gets sent, right? And it was
Yes.
really
Or
interesting
or
as
that
my
or that it's or that we're choosing it.
We're
over
choosing it.
something else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so this is such an interesting thing, because back to the younger generation, I don't know that a lot of them have had to confront this whole, of course, who knows where things are going to go shortly here if the lovely Supreme Court decides that, oh yeah, conversion therapy is the solution. But I don't think the younger generation has confronted some of this stuff that we have. Like, it used to be, you made this choice, you can be fixed. This is not what, da 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 da. I don't know that they've experienced that to that depth. You know what I'm saying? And I think this is where we can bring so much beauty into our world as guys who are over 40, that yes, we're navigating our own stuff. Let's not be stupid about that. But here's where we can be, people of wisdom as well.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, forget this stuff that most men go through as they age, the aches and pains and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I find that very interesting that someone doesn't understand that, because for me, it's a muscle that I have to be very aware of flexing. I have occasionally found myself in an either or right or wrong, or there's something wrong with me, or did I do something wrong thing, because I was, like, my parents were very strict, and there was always, there were whether I was good or not good or whatever it was, I always felt like knowing that I was different, knowing that I didn't have any interest in, and I know that there are gay men that, like, as a gay man have like fathered children, or, use surrogates or adoption, whatever that. That's not my thing. I think it's great that there's a generation of people who want to do that. I know that you had children, and when you were straight, but I think that's
it's because I chose to be gay. Let's not forget that I chose to be gay.
Exactly right, but I'm sorry, I didn't mean that to sound like a slight.
No, I'm joking, because that's the perfect example of some people thinking that way. Like, here's this, and in fact, not to distract from what you're saying, it's still so interesting that there are people out there like, okay, well, now that you've chosen to be gay, I'm like, wow.
Yeah. Listen, I had a relationship with somebody who was much older than I was at the time, and had grown children who were very unaccepting. And, the mother poisoned those children against him, and he died. And, he was, my partner, and I was like, I reached out to the kids. I was like, listen, this man's going to die. And in a year or 5 or 10, when you realize that what you're thinking, or what information you have that was given to you by your mom, is not the truth, it's going to be too late then for you, not for him, because he's going to be dead, but too late for you. And it's something, it's something that it's just behavior that I don't understand where that comes from. When people quote the Bible, oh, Jesus said, well, Jesus didn't really say anything about homosexuality in the Bible. It's a specific part of the Bible that doesn't have anything to do with what Jesus said.
Exactly.
But Jesus also, but the Bible also says not to eat shellfish, and it says that you should tear your eye out if you do this, and you should cut your arm off, and you should sell your daughter into slavery, and you shouldn't wear fabrics that are mixed and all that. It's very interesting how they focus in on that one thing, but all the rest of, but there's this magic book that if you follow it, you're gonna, and it's like, I hate to tell you this, but that book was compiled from scrolls that were found in a vault somewhere that had been there forever.
Yep.
And they were translated by somebody who didn't speak the language. It wasn't like they had the Google Translator or an encyclopedia or something that had all those characters in it. They translated it from what they could gather was what it was. And even just in the 20th century, the Bible has gone through several reinterpretations. It didn't even have the word homosexuality in it until like the 1930s and the 1940s.
Yep.
You know, it's
1942.
Like, which also, which harkens to the current conversation about autism and Tylenol. It's like, yeah, okay, well, if everybody who was circumcised was given Tylenol, everybody in our generation, if you weren't in a religion that didn't allow for circumcision, or you were poor and you were born at home and you weren't circumcised, every man in our generation, 10 years younger to our age, maybe a few years older, we were all circumcised at birth. And if we all got Tylenol, why isn't a larger portion of the population autistic?
Yes.
Or choosing to be gay, or
yes.
all
Whatever
of the other lovely things that we're being vilified for at the moment.
Exactly. And I love that these are the sort of things that come from having lived, having walked the walk, having talked the talk, having seen yourself, having lost yourself, having gone through some pain of, relationships and losing people, having lived through the AIDS epidemic. They just help us see the world through a different light. And guys, this is why I wanted JP to come on and chat, just a casual chat. And I hope that for some of you who maybe are like finding yourself lost, questioning, thinking you're not good enough because the gay community may be throwing you some shade. Maybe you're just starting your journey out. Hopefully something that was said today touches you.
I want to say one last thing that speaks to what your closing statement was. I have more questions now at this age than I have answers. And I think one of the things that has kept me relevant is that I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and I'm willing to learn what I don't know. But I'm also very aware that I have questions and that I'm not necessarily looking for answers, but I think it's better sometimes to just sit with the question.
I love that. It was interesting, and this will add to what you said, and then we'll wrap it up. I don't remember where. So like I said, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts over the last few days.
Yes.
One of the most profound statements, and because my 62-year-old brain's kind of slow right now to remember who said it, was, I've come to an age where I know what I know. I'm not afraid to share that with anybody, not to cause problems. I'm willing to share what I know with anybody. I also am at an age where what I don't know is giving me the curiosity to discover.
Exactly.
So that 10 years from now, I can say, I know now what I know, and I'm willing to share that. But I'm also still willing to be curious, so that I'm always in that space of, here's what I know. I'm going to share it. Whether people want to hear it or not, that's up to them. But I'm also not so in my own ego so much to go, and I know everything. No, I'm still curious and I'm still learning. And to me, I think that's just a beautiful space for anyone to be in, but especially to be in as guys over 40, to constantly be saying, here's what I know, but here's where I'm still curious and wanting to learn. And I'm so glad you brought that up, JP. And
perfect example of that is technology.
Absolutely.
Right? During the pandemic, I watched every podcast on how to work my phone and how to record videos and all that kind of stuff. And so, but I have friends that are my age that don't even know how to send a text.
Yep. I hear you. Well, I'm so glad that you came on and shared what you do know and that you're curious to keep learning. I love having you in my world, man. I hope you know that.
Thank you.
Guys, you will be able to connect with him, see all his stuff that he does. If you're in the New York City area, I bet you if you said, hey, I heard you on Rick's podcast, you seem like somebody I'd like to know, I bet he'd probably make time for you, and come and see you. So Thank you so much, JP. I really appreciate you, buddy.
My pleasure. This was awesome. Thank you.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.